Good evening. Welcome to Strategic Planning meeting scheduled for Monday, June 30th, 2025 at 6 p.m. We have two items on the agenda. First item on the agenda is the matter of the 2026 tax budget. It's referred by Finance Director Pileski. Finance Director Pileski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you know, every July we are required to prepare and submit to the Lorain County Budget Commission what is known as the tax budget. So what you have before you tonight is the 2026 tax budget. So basically, it's all estimated numbers. So I have to go in and estimate where I think cash is going to be for each fund type, not individual funds with the exception of the general fund, but by fund type, and then estimate revenues to come in during 2026, estimate expenditures, and then where we will be at the end of 2026. So this document, again, is all estimates. The beginning number of beginning cash will change at the end of the year when we know what the actual cash number at the end of the year is. The numbers for property tax revenue and local government, which have their separate column in this budget, will be changed when the county has their actual estimates available. And then, so in this budget, the big difference between this and past budgets is that this 2026 is our year for 27 pays. So that automatically is going to bump up the general fund by 1.3 million. So the last year we had 27 pays was 2015. So it happens every 11 years. And this next year will be our year for 27 pays. So starting out with the general fund, and keep in mind that these are estimates, and I'm always very conservative when I start out with revenues. So I've got us starting out with 13.2 million at the end of this year, beginning of next year, which was better than what I thought when I prepared this document last year. So we're doing better. And then the estimated real estate taxes, local government, and then other sources, and estimated expenditures at 42,169,000. So with that being said, if all this holds true, we would only have carry over about 5.3 million in the general fund into 2027. So payroll has grown to the point where it's not keeping up with revenues that are going into the general fund. And, obviously, I'm hoping that this doesn't hold true. I'm hoping it's better, but this is where I'm going to start. So the general fund, you see there, the TIF fund, that is the Chestnut Commons, the original Chestnut Commons TIF project. And then special revenue funds, we have a total of 45 special revenue funds that are involved in the process. 2 debt service funds, currently 8 capital project funds, 5 enterprise funds, 2 internal service funds, and 17 trust and custodial funds. We don't appropriate any money in those funds because we're not required to, but it's included in this document. And then the public library is the money that we actually don't get the money, but it passes through because we were the conduit issuer, or not the issuer, but they used us to put it on the ballot. So the money flows through our books, but goes directly to them, but it still appears on the tax budget. So I guess obviously my biggest concern moving forward is the general fund and the employees' health insurance fund. So we're just kind of treading water with the employees' health insurance fund. The committee did bump up the contribution for both the city and the employees. That was effective, I believe, May 1st. So that's starting to show, help us out. But if the health claims keep rising the way they are, we're going to be in trouble with this fund, which we sort of are already. So, again, the revenue estimates for the general fund are on the conservative side because I'm not going to start out high. You know, I've done it this way for many, many years, and, you know, I think, you know, this is probably a worst-case scenario. So if revenues come in better than anticipated and we're able to cut back on some of the expenditures, we'll finish the year with more than 5.3 million going into 2027. But, so the process now is for council to pass this. It gets submitted to the Lorraine County Budget Commission. This becomes our beginning of the Certificate of Estimated Resources for 2026, which basically governs how much we are legally available to appropriate by fund type. So again, that'll be amended several times over as the year goes on, when we know what the actual beginning cash is, when we see how revenues are coming in, and move on from there. So upon your approval at council next week, then I will, I believe it's next week, yes, I will submit it to the Budget Commission and get us started for 2026.
Thank you. Thank you, Finance. Any questions for the Finance Director? Mr. Tolet.
Through you. Quick question. It's my understanding that the millage issue was removed from the state budget. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes,
And,
so that was House Bill 335.
and it was removed, is that correct?
Yes, it was not, I don't believe it made it out of committee.
Okay, that's
So-
very good news.
Yeah, so for everybody's information, the inside millage is the unvoted millage that all municipalities in Ohio, counties, schools receive, so it's unvoted. And the initiative is to eliminate that. So that would have been a loss of $6 million for the city. And most of our unvoted millage goes into the general bond retirement fund, which is used to pay for long-term general obligation bonds, which would have been for the central maintenance garage. So if that would have gone through, we probably would have had to scrap the project, because there would have been no way, the general fund would have had to make the debt service payments over 30 years, and you're talking probably $1.5 million per year for 30 years as far as a bond payment on that complex. So with it being removed, I guess we move forward, but I think property tax is going to be the hot topic moving forward because of where they're heading and where they've gone, and so.
Mr. Schneider.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Director Pileski. I think the mayor had touched base on this via email, but we're still at a freeze with the marijuana host city revenues, correct?
Yeah, that was actually taken out of the state budget as well, so we will not see any money in 2025. It's been pushed to November for the next discussion, I guess, at the state level, so we will not see any money this year.
Thank you.
Ms. Sawerka.
Thank you, through you. Under the real estate taxes, so you're estimating 9.1 million. That includes the library pass-through. I'm just curious, with the reevaluation that occurred, what's the difference in that? What would that number have looked like last year versus, the
Yeah.
the reevaluation?
Excluding the Leary Public Library, our property tax revenue has gone up about 1.4 million this year. And that, of course, is split between general fund, general bond retirement, police, and fire pension funds.
Through you. So the 9.1 includes the reevaluation number?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question is, what's the average monthly payout for the employee health fund? I mean, if you're at 224 right now and you're estimating 136 by the end of the year, what are you paying out monthly, average?
Oh, boy, we're probably averaging monthly this year, probably close to $1 million a month. So, well, no, I take that back. Let me think about this a minute. Probably somewhere between probably 750 to 800,000 a month.
And through you. And the amount that you're appropriating or you're getting out of the city employees' payment and the city matches, what? How much a month?
85 city, 15.
Percent of that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So that fund is, I mean, I'm really not supposed to submit a document that shows an overspending what we have available. So I kind of made that pretty much flat, but I don't know if it will be flat. I mean, I think claim costs have gone up like 13% this year. So it's something the committee is going to have to keep an eye on and maybe even take a look at the plan itself, you know.
Any other questions? Law Director Deary.
Thank you through you, Mr. President. Just for drafting purposes, I know that this budget needs to be into the county budgeting commission before the end of the month. Is this being requested to be passed on emergency?
Yeah, it has to be submitted by July the 17th or the 19th, one of those two. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
we'll do it by suspension emergency. So the motion would be on that as well. Any other questions for the Finance Director? Let me read this. We've considered the matter of the 2026 tax budget, and an ordinance authorizing the Finance Director to establish the tax budget for the 2026. This motion will be made under suspension of rules and declared emergency. Could I get a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Can I get a second? Second. Second. All those in, any further discussion? Question? All those in favor on the suspension? Aye. On a vote of aye, opposed nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed nay. Motion carried. I'll pass this along. Please make sure you sign it.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I think for the record, we only took 2 votes on the suspension. We didn't,
I'm sorry.
point of order.
Through you, this is just the committee report, so the full vote will be Monday night.
Right.
So
I knew that.
you're just passing the committee report at this time. Thank you.
sorry.
Try to foil me up over there, Mr. Toledo.
It feels like a full council meeting because it's a full committee.
Okay, we'll let this kind of, the committee report kind of get through, get it signed, and give it to the clerk's office, and then we'll go into item number 2.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Callen, if you want to just hold on to that at the end of the meeting, you can give it to the clerk's office. Okay, item number 2 is the matter of the Reister Point Crossing.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just briefly, under the new construction of the ADA, there exists potential for conflicts. Therefore, until further notice, sitting here today, I'll withdraw from the vote or discussion on this matter.
All right, for the record, Mr. Lippin are you staying in the conversation or are you removing yourself? Okay. For the record, please note that for the council clerk's office, Mr. Lippin is stepping out. Okay, so we have, what was laid out before you as we were signing the committee reports is the letter that was sent out by DBR's attorneys in regards to the developmental agreement, and then the red line version that I had asked our legal team to kind of present to this council. So as they're going to go over each line item, we have Attorney Balthus here, and Attorney Friedman here, who represent us in regards to this matter. So at this point, I will defer to Law Director Deary, and then we'll have our attorneys come up.
Through you, just a matter of housekeeping, we just wanted to make sure that everybody on that side, including the mayor and/or Director Pileski, had copies, just
very good.
so they know where we're at.
All right.
I will, at this time, defer to Attorney Friedman and Attorney Balthus, and again, turn it over to them at this time. Okay.
I would say by the microphone, and then I guess, and if you please could, each of you at the time of your speaking, state your name and address for the record.
Put this up on the screen.
I'll start. It's Steve Friedman, of course, Squire Patton Boggs, one of your outside counsel. Just laying some of the ground rules. I will be talking to you in executive session with an update of the current litigation as a separate matter. Now, this is talking about the new development agreement. The only connection that the new development agreement has to the current litigation is one of the provisions in the new development agreement would stay the litigation and potentially dismiss it if we were to pass it. That's the only connection. They're not really interrelated other than that because, of course, the litigation is dealing with the alleged breach of the original development agreement from 2019 and the continuation agreement from 2023. So that, again, is a subject that we can talk about in executive session. To the extent you have questions about the new development agreement that somehow relate to the litigation, we can wait and talk about that in executive session. But the current negotiations that we are having over this new development agreement is not a subject of litigation, is not the subject for the executive session. So let me just make sure everyone understands that before I let Russ talk about what's happening with the negotiations on the new development agreement.
Thank you, Steve. Again, my name is Russ Balthus, and I'm also an attorney with Squire Patton Boggs and one of your outside counsels, and we represent the city in this matter. What I was going to do this evening is kind of walk through where we are currently in the negotiations with DBR. What has been distributed to you, and you can take some time to review that. I don't expect you to read it all right now, obviously, but of course, if you have any questions, you feel free to reach through Amanda to us, and we'll be happy to help with that. So what I'm going to do is give you a general update on the most fundamental changes that were in the most recent draft of the development agreement, what they mean for the city, what they mean for the project, and how that works. And then I'd also like to walk through some bullet points that begin on the second page from the letter from Attorney David Lum that represents DBR to kind of talk through where we're at on those issues. So beginning with the agreement, as you recall, the city entered into an agreement quite a few years ago. We've had the litigation. We're now looking through the amendment. The project has changed. We're now looking to do some residential components in addition to the commercial components. That requires a different type of TIF. We've talked about all of that. We've been making some good progress. One of the fundamental changes that has happened with the development agreement is, as you may recall, it was originally anticipated that the city would issue bonds that would then create the revenue that would pay for some additional public improvements to finish the proposed development of DBR. There's a lot of complexity with all of that, a lot of work that we would all have to go through. And as the parties have discussed, I think it was mutually agreeable that this might be a good opportunity for the Port Authority to play a role, and that the Port Authority would be able to issue those bonds in place of the city. So the way the original agreement this original amendment was drafted is it was the city was going to issue the bonds, and if DBR chose to use a Port Authority or a private entity, they could. The most recent amendment is now DBR will work with the Port Authority to issue the bonds or another type of financing, but the obligation of the city to issue the bonds is no longer part of the agreement. So it's an obligation of the Port Authority. So you might ask, well, why are we still involved? The city is the only legal entity that has the ability to implement the TIF, and again, that's tax increment financing, so that's what generates the pilot payments, and happy to answer any general questions about TIFs you might have, but that's what generates the payments in lieu of taxes that come to the city. The city would then pledge those agreements to the Port Authority, and the Port Authority would then use those payments to pay the debt service on the bond. So instead of the city issuing it, the port issues it, but the city is still the entity that collects the payments and has to provide those payments to the Port Authority. So that would be our role for the purposes of that agreement. That's a very fundamental change in the agreement. I think from our perspective, I think from a legal perspective, I think it's a good change for the city because it puts less obligations on the city, and it creates a path for DBR to move forward, get the bonds issued, and get the infrastructure financed. One thing that I think is important to note is, if you might recall, part of the proposal is that the city would receive a portion of those bond proceeds. The exact amount, the exact amount the city is supposed to receive is $2,724,491.35. And the way that was drafted, and that's for our portion or a portion of the construction of the connector road that's already been completed. So the way it was initially proposed is the city would issue bonds, and then we would keep that portion and then give the rest for the additional improvements. The fact that we're going to the Port Authority does not change that. It just is now the fact that as a condition of the arrangement, the Port Authority would issue the bonds. They would be legally obligated to write that check to the city to reimburse the city for the $2.7 million. I think that's important. There's also in the agreement language that once the debt service is paid on all the different debt that's outstanding, any excess or leftover pilot payments that are left after making those payments, the city has a right to receive those for additional reimbursement for costs that the city has incurred. That is still a condition, even though the Port Authority is issuing the bonds, that right of the city to receive those funds still exists, and the city has a legal right to receive those funds. So the fact that we're now doing the Port Authority as the issuer as opposed to the city does not change the economics from the city's perspective. We still get the funds that we were agreed to, and we also get the excess over time to get the additional, and that's approximately $2.8 million. And any excess would also come to the city. Mr. President.
Attorney Balthus, if I could. I guess I'm just trying to, make sure if anybody has any questions about what's being talked about now with regards to the Port Authority. At this point, I think it's behoove us while this is being discussed, if you want to weigh in on something or ask a question, now is the time where we wait until he kind of fundamentally goes through things instead of going back. Does anybody have any questions thus far? Law Director Deere, if you want to weigh in before
Yes,
Mr.
just
Work.
through you, Mr. President, and just to remind everyone, this 2.7, and it was very nicely specifically laid out, that represents the money that is due the city for the road that is still outstanding. So that's what that payment represents.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in other words, so the city borrowed $5.2 million to put in the road. that note is still outstanding. It's a one-year note that's been rolled over a number of times because there's no TIFs coming in to make payments on that. So the 2.7 that we would get from the sale of the bonds would go and be applied against that 5.2 that we owe, and lowering that debt by the 2.7. And we would be responsible for the remainder, because that would be the portion of the road that was the Walmart area, so.
Ms. Soroka?
Through you. So the document that was distributed to us with the red line, that's the most current, because it's dated, I think it's 6/1, is that correct?
The most recent document that was distributed is the most recent document, and that was the city's version to the developer. The developer has certain objections or concerns to the document, which are set forth in their June 26th letter.
Okay, if I may, so just so I'm following along here, the document that was given to us this evening is the document that went back, came back to us, we made our comments, our changes are in red, our requested changes are in red, or their requested changes are in red?
Our requested changes are in
Okay.
red.
All right, and then the letter addresses our requested changes.
Correct, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As well?
Through you, Mr. President. So we were getting, the engineering department was getting bills for work that was being done to kind of take care of the issues with the so-called flooding that was going on. I don't know that exact number, let's say it was $1 million. Where does that fit into this piece of pie? Is that getting paid out of this or the new agreement? How is that? Could you explain, please?
I can. Do you want to?
Yeah, so, I mean, it starts to touch a little bit on the litigation, but if this agreement is agreed to by the city and DBR, those invoices would be subsumed in what's being put in the TIF financing for the new project. If that's not the case, those would be in dispute as part of the litigation.
Very good. All right. Attorney Balthus, go ahead.
Thank you. So at this time, I think what I will do, unless someone has a different approach they'd like to take, is on page 2 of the letter from Attorney Lum, you'll notice there's a couple bullet points. The one at the top we can put aside at the moment, but the 3 at the bottom, we can kind of work through those. These are what I would describe as the issues that are outstanding from DBR's perspective that they objected to our most recent draft that you have a copy of. The first bullet point actually goes directly to Mr. Oswald's point. The question here, the remedial public improvements are the improvements that DBR feels are necessary to get the development where they feel it should be. We added language, and you'll see it in the red in our comment, and this language is language that we had in the agreement before that DBR had taken out that we then put back in. And what that language does is it just makes it very clear that we do not agree that the remedial public improvements represent the scope of the developable improvements to be completed under the settlement agreement. And so the rest of that, I can.
Yeah, and, I mean, look, as for the litigation, we have to have that language. If we reach this agreement and everything goes through, that's great, it becomes a non-issue. But even if we sign this agreement, there's ways that doesn't get fully implemented, and we would then be agreeing that they're right in the litigation, which of course we don't agree to. So that's why it's for avoidance of doubt. We have to have that language, and maybe we're just talking past each other with them, and we need to clarify with them. But, you know, we can't have language out there agreeing that they win the lawsuit, which we don't agree to, of course, just in case this doesn't get implemented.
Another significant difference as well is the remedial public improvements would be paid only to the extent TIF revenues are available. It would be paid through the bond issuance. That's a little less clear when it comes to the developable improvements. You know, so that's another important distinction between how those two costs are characterized from the city's financial perspective. So I can move on to the next bullet point unless there's any questions.
Okay, we can come back if there are something that...
Thank you, Mr. President. The next bullet point, I think this is just an example of us talking past each other. There's language in the agreement that you'll notice that we highlighted out, and all this language says is that the new TIF ordinances have been duly passed by the city and have not been amended, modified, repealed, and are in full force and effect. The reason we took that out is because given the timing of when the school district approval would happen, if that language was in there, the TIF ordinances would not be in full force and effect if the school district hasn't ultimately approved under the way the statutory scheme works with TIFs. So we didn't want to make that representation on behalf of the city if it weren't true. Once the school district approves, happy to make that representation. And as the Port Authority would go to issue bonds down the road, they're going to ask the city to make that representation again. And again, along this, council hasn't amended those TIF ordinances, there would be no reason why the city wouldn't make that representation that they've adopted these ordinances and that they've not been amended or passed. So it's very much a lot of lawyer talk, but I think it's not a real fundamental issue. I think it was just a bit of a miscommunication between the parties, and I don't view this as a substantive issue, but that's the background. But happy to answer any questions anybody has on that.
Ms. Sawirka?
Thank you, through you. So if you just rewrote that sentence to include something along the lines of the TIF ordinances have been authorized by Elyria City Council as of blank date through number such and such, that would clarify then, right?
There are definitely ways to clarify it. We would have to reference the school district approval. I think the issue and why the language was taken out now is there's still unknowns about when the school district will approve. And so it was it's their decision, not ours, obviously. But so we just wanted to make sure that language wasn't in there so that there wouldn't be, that when we signed the agreement, it was accurate.
So through you. So it sounds like that just needs to be revised so that it's clear that it has or hasn't passed, and here's the authority.
Correct.
Okay.
I do not view this as a significant
Major thing.
issue.
Thank you.
No,
That's
thank
on
you.
page 15, right? The other one was on page 11.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
If there's ways, Russ, that you kind of cross-reference the letter to what
Good
you're
idea.
speaking to, that might be helpful, just so that if we're following along with that. Before we move on, Law Director Deere, did you want to weigh on something?
Through you, Mr. President, I would just state that yes, there would be ways to revise it, but I would refer all of you back to the letter from Attorney Lum, which clearly states, why is the city unable to make this representation? Well, we're not able to because as of the present, it is not factually accurate to make that representation. And they're saying, has something been amended or modified? Are we unwilling to pass this? No. The time frame is that theoretically we would pass these all at the same time, but the bottom line is that the school board is not meeting until July 16th. So we're not going to make a statement that we know is factually inaccurate and bind us to it. I mean, obviously that would be up to you, but that would certainly be against legal advice for you to do so. So that's where we are.
Good. Thank you.
So now we're to the third bullet point, and this would be page 18 of the amendment to the development agreement. And this is language that we took out, and this is language that involves the city's approval of the final plat and each phase of the private improvements as set forth in the preliminary plan. The reason that we took this out is, and Director Deary can correct me if I misspeak, but normally your planning commission would approve these type of plans, and then they would come to the city council for their review and approval. You'll notice that in the last line that we removed, it requires, as the same may be varied by the planning commission, the city will approve the same. So this was legally obligating council to approve whatever variances the planning commission made, which council may wish to do, council may wish not to do, but we wanted to be very clear that if we would agree to their language, council is waiving their power to do that, and our position was to maintain council's authority to do that.
Law
Mr.
Director,
President.
yeah, Law Director Deary.
Thank you, through you, Mr. President. And I also, please, Attorney Brunig, if I misspeak, if you'll jump in. This development is contemplated to be built in phases. So it would be basically council giving its seal of approval in advance of the final plat for each phase, basically pre-approving. Now, I mean, it does, the language that we did agree to, just so you know, and this is on bottom of page 18, is that DBR and the city agree that they shall cooperate with one another and act in good faith regarding the submittal review and approval of the final plat for each phase of the private improvements set forth in the preliminary plan. Furthermore, the city shall require DBR to enter into a blah, blah, blah agreement. I don't want to say blah, 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 it's all important. But, and that the city may not impose any more stringent conditions upon DBR than what it would otherwise require in such developer performance and maintenance agreement. It shall act in good faith in negotiating and approving. Ultimately, this would be a council's decision, but it would be against legal advice for us to recommend that you would essentially waive your legislative function of approving a final plat ahead of time.
Mr. Tolet and then Mr. Schneider.
Through you, Mr. President. What we're asking for, though, isn't this different than we agreed upon earlier? This change to the agreement?
This has been an issue in all of our discussions, so we've
Has it?
consistently
Okay.
raised.
I'm just,
Yep, no, appreciate the question.
okay.
I will say that it has not been uncommon for, we would provide language, and their comments, the language would be removed. We would receive the comments back and then be told that we had agreed to it when it was still working through the process and still working through review.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Law Director Deary, wouldn't this just be standard as we've always done with any multi-phase development, where the developer comes through for phase 1, 2, 3 to Planning Commission to Council for approval? This is just the standard that we typically do, correct?
Through you, Mr. President, Councilman Schneider, yes, that is the standard that we are requesting. The negotiation is asking that the council would, in this language, that the city will approve the same. We believe that that would leave the city vulnerable to an accusation of breach.
Law Director Bruning, if you want to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Law Director Deary stated, you're basically, with this language, if you accept this language, you are pre-approving whatever is brought to and approved by Planning Commission. That's important here because really when you approve a final plat, the Planning Commission is the platting authority. Council, as the legislative authority, accepts the easements, the rights of way, the public improvements as they're indicated on that plat. With this language, you're sort of abdicating the right to review those things. It's kind of a big deal, at least in my mind, for council to be accepting rights of way and easements and public improvements. That's a big part of your job. For you to not have the ability to review that is something that we wanted to at least have this conversation with you about and discuss it. So if that's something that council wants to do, again, you are pre-agreeing to those conditions without having the legislative opportunity to review.
Thank you. Ms. Sawerka.
Through you. So the purpose of them inserting this language is to keep the process going, to move it faster? I'm trying to understand, and there's 4 lawyers standing here, 5. What's the definition of all reasonable diligence legally? I mean, it says that we will review the same with all reasonable diligence.
A couple, Mr. President, through you, a couple of comments. The reason a developer would ask for this language is it's not uncommon, and I would argue that asking for that reasonable diligence is kind of boilerplate. They usually ask for people to move it quickly. It's really to give you a reason to be able to call the city and say, hey, remember, please keep moving, keep this moving. So the reason they are asking for the city will approve the same is to give the developer certainty. That's why they want that, is if they know that a planning commission has approved something, if there's a chance that the council may not approve it, that poses risk. And an example like this, with the roads, if the roads are private roads, they are not eligible to be reimbursed with TIF proceeds. So the determination whether roads are public or private, and whether council chooses to accept them or not, is a fundamental financial term. So that's why I think, again, I cannot speak for DBR, and I am not speaking for DBR, but that is why you would see language like that, or why I think, if I had to guess, why I anticipate they're making the request.
Through you, Mr. President. So if we're kind of pre-approving at this point for the whole development, which we say we are going to be doing in phases, and after we get through, or if we don't get through the first phase, we've already approved the second phase, that now they want to make a change in the type of development that they want to do. Let's say they want to, now it's not working, they want to go to commercial. Are they allowed to do that, or is that set in stone right now that they have to go along with this till the project is finished?
Generally speaking, the document does kind of set forth the general concept of the plan, and they would have to follow the general design of the plan. I think what this language gets to is ideas about the width of roads, like the things that Planning Commission would be looking at and approving and choosing to grant a variance or not. What this language does is if the Planning Commission chooses to grant that variance, council would normally have the obligation or the opportunity to overrule Planning Commission. If you chose to do that and this language was in here, you would be breaching this development agreement. And that's what we're trying to highlight for you.
With the follow-up?
Oh, if I follow up. So all that we have approved in these previous planning commission meetings, that's null and void. This would have to be all done again, or these, okay.
No.
Mr. Schneider, excuse me.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Attorney Balthus. Are these public or private streets? I'm still confused on this. Are they deemed public or private, and they're part of an HOA? So are they public streets with an HOA? Where are we at with this? Just curious.
The developer's request is that they would be public streets.
And then just to follow up, just for clarity-wise, if this agreement were to go fully through as a residential TIF, they cannot be revert back to a commercial TIF. Is that true?
That is correct. Well, if it is implemented as an incentive district TIF, which is a residential TIF, and if the city receives pilot payments, it then cannot become a commercial TIF in the future. That's correct.
And just for clarity, in regards to the financing and the backing of the bonds, the Port Authority is going to be backing everything on this. Other than, not the city I don't, maybe I'm ahead of myself, I don't know, but is the Port Authority, based on what those dialogues?
I have not had conversations with the Port Authority. My understanding in a transaction like this, the Port Authority would not pledge any of its own funds to these bonds. It would act simply as a conduit. So it would say, to the extent we receive the funds from the city, which would just be our pilots, they would pay to the bondholder.
Right. If I misspoke on that, that's how I wanted to have it relayed. Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I speak only for myself, but I don't think that council should give up our obligation and duty to approve each phase as it comes along. We do that with every other developer. This developer should be no different. So I would not be willing to agree to that part. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Schneider again?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this may be directed more towards Law Director Deary. With it being structured as public roads, how is that work with an HOA being involved? Like, I know the HOA technically isn't in control until it gets to 90%. So it's actually the developer until the occupancy of the HOA gets closer to the 90% mark. So can you touch base on that at all, or one of the attorneys? I don't know.
Well, first off, I mean, through you, Mr. President, I mean, there could be an HOA and they can still be publicly dedicated roads. And the key for all of this to work, and basically for those roads to be considered public improvements, they need to be public roads. So council would ultimately have to dedicate them, right? If they're private roads, like sometimes you see in certain developments, they're not going to be considered public improvements. And then they would not be able to be reimbursed, or the construction of those would not be considered public improvements, such that they would not be able to be reimbursed through this financial structure. As far as how the HOA would interact, I would defer to my colleagues over here, but I can tell you that, I mean, whether or not these roads are dedicated will be key. Now, there may be other public improvements that are part of this, this construction project, but clearly the roads and the infrastructure that goes along with that is going to be a big part of that.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Attorney Breen, did you want to weigh in on anything, or?
I think she was absolutely right. I mean, the HOA can be formed for any number of different improvements in a development. Doesn't have to be the roads. It could be a sign or signage. It could be detention basins or, storm drainage or something along those lines. It could be any combination or all of those. In this case, it would just exclude the roads because they would be publicly dedicated. Therefore, we would have full responsibility for them, just like any other street. So hopefully that. Yeah.
And these improvements only go up to the right-of-way for the TIF?
They would be in the right-of-way.
Right, but the limits of beyond any of these improvements, like, for example, the cleanouts or the water service taps, it stops not in the utility easement, or is it going into, does it directly stop at the right-of-way?
For the residential component, it would stop in the right-of-way. With the commercial component, because of job creation, it can go a little bit farther for the purposes of stormwater.
Okay, very good. All right, very good, thank you.
The next bullet point references section 6.7, which is on page 32 of the agreement in the cost certificate section. I also view this as one of the more minor issues that have been raised. This is language, just to be clear, and this is standard language, is even though the Port Authority would be issuing the bonds, as we discussed earlier, it's still the city that has the authority to implement the TIF. It's the city that has to establish the TIF fund. It's the city that receives the TIF funds and then gives them to the county. So from a state audit perspective, it's important that the city have the documentation that they need to address issues like what President Stewart just pointed out, that the money things that are getting reimbursed are things that fall within the statute and exactly where, and sometimes you need additional information to properly document that. I do think, I did not think that this language would be controversial. Obviously, the developer is objecting to it. There could be ways to work through amending it, such as language that could be any information necessary to comply with state audits or requested by the state auditor, or things to ensure our compliance with the state auditor. I'd probably work with Director Pileski to make sure we had language that we were comfortable with that maybe was a bit narrower than what was proposed. All right, the next question, or next section is section 8.1A3, and I don't know, and I'll let Attorney Friedman address that.
So this section 8.1A3, you recall, as part of the settlement of the first case, we agreed that to the extent there were future problems with the detention basins, because the contractor that we engaged to design them did something wrong, which we, of course, never admitted, and we don't think they did anything wrong, but to the extent in the future there was some failure because of a design error, we'd be responsible for it. That's right in the settlement agreement, continuation agreement. The blue language is the same thing. I remember, again, Russ is the principal drafter, but he asked me for my thoughts on this. This was one of the things I had, and I asked to add this language. We put it in the very first draft. They keep taking it out, we keep putting it back in, because it's essential that we are responsible if there's a failure because of the initial design. If there's a failure in the future because of something that DBR does, either to change the detention ponds or to change the use of the development property, we're not responsible for that. And without this language, we would be. So again, this seems like an easy one to me. I don't know if we're just talking past each other or don't understand frankly why they keep taking this out, because this is exactly what we agreed to in the settlement.
Anybody have any questions in regards to that? So we're looking at 5 bullet points that are still in question, that need to be resolved, I guess is what the talking points are in regards to that.
Yes, Mr. President. The draft that we had sent back, as you can see, there were not many changes. There were some other things that we had worked through and found common ground on. The red line that you have is our comments and our changes, and this is their response. And these were the only issues that they raised in this letter.
Okay. Mr. Tolet, oh, I thought, okay. Does anybody have any questions in regards to any of the bullet points or any other comments in regards to, Mr., now you do?
Yes, now I do. Is this, and I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball, is this something that you believe? Because if we can get this worked out, is it possible that we can have it worked out by the 7th? And the only reason I ask that is because of the timing with the school vote that they would take on that. If we're down to these 5, and I don't want to say minor, they're not minor, they're very important, but they're short. Do you think it's something that could happen in the next week?
I appreciate you prefacing with it with a crystal ball. What I would say is, in terms of the statutory notices that are required to adopt the TIF ordinances, with the help of the law department, all those notices have been sent, all the TIF ordinances have been drafted. If DBR were to agree to the draft that we had sent, I would see no reason, if it were council's wish to adopt it on the 7th. My concern would be, I can't speak for where DBR will be on some of these issues and where we will ultimately land, and I can't speculate to how long that would take.
Thank you.
Ms. Sawerka?
Thank you, through you. So of the 5, I guess I was thinking along the lines of Mr. Tolet in that if you had to rank them in, I guess, holdout versus revision, it sounds like there's 2.5 that just need some wordsmithing.
Legalese.
And then the I guess if we have a little bit better understanding of the 2 or 2.5 that seem to be the true kind of holding up things. I agree with my colleague, Mrs. Mitchell, on giving carte blanche ahead of time. I don't feel comfortable with that at all. But it sounds to me like there's 2.5 here that are just, they need some wordsmithing. Just one other question through the chair. We have not responded to the letter of the 26th, I'm assuming, correct?
That's correct.
That's for tonight, that's what tonight's meeting was about?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Ms. Davis?
Through you, the chair. So does DBR have these papers already in their hands to know
Yes.
what we need to do to settle this?
They received our comments, I forget the date, a while back. And then their letter was drafted by DBR's attorney, so I have to assume DBR has it.
Through you, Mr. President, our draft was sent to DBR's attorneys over a week ago.
Is there any other further questions? Mayor Brubaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So I had reached out to Attorney Balthus early this morning and asked him for an update for tonight's meeting, and the 5 things that he shared tonight with you are the same 5 things, obviously, that he shared with me, and him and I had a 40-minute conversation walking through each of these, and I agree with you, Councilwoman Swerka, there's a lot of your words with Smith wording. Mine was, we just got to work out the words on this. I think this is still doable. I was under the impression that the assignment agreement was the main kicking point. As I made that comment earlier this month, there appears to be 1 or 2 other items on here that are concerning to our side of the team, and I don't disregard those thoughts at all. But I think instead of, and I don't know the conversations, whether the conversations were Zoom, if the conversations were just phone calls, or they were just sending documents back and forth. But with the Smith wording, to steal Councilwoman Swerka's words, I think it would be imperative over the next few days to have verbal conversations from both sides of this, so this wording can be worked out. I don't know if the 7th, I was hopeful that tonight there would be a vote. Obviously, that's not going to happen, and that's perfectly fine because we're not there yet. But with next Monday having a strategic planning meeting, if we could get these things worked out, again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know how they're going to respond to this. If we can get to that point, and I appreciate the fact that they've already worked on, the legal team has already worked on the TIF part of this to coincide with that. But there's some stuff in here that I think can be easily worked out. I do know there's some contention from both sides on trust, on how the language is put in there, and I certainly agree with our staff on the protecting of the city in a lot of these things. But as we move forward, I would implore you guys to have verbal conversations if that's not what you've already been doing, so that you're talking to each other versus sending letters back and forth to each other. But now that we're down to these things, I agree. I think we can get to the point where we're going to get this done. Councilwoman Mitchell, I agree with you on the point of the carte blanche. I think this is imperative that you guys still have a say in that. I don't foresee any reason that you would not concur with Planning Commission, but taking that right away, I would not necessarily agree with either. So, thank you.
Through you, Mr. President, I would just remind the members that City Hall is closed for the holiday on Friday. That being said, your very diligent clerk's office will be looking for all legislation, I believe by noon Thursday, is that right? That doesn't mean that we couldn't work past that, but this is the type of legislation that I would be very reluctant to lay on the table before you. I would want you to see that served in due course. Obviously, that is up to all of you if you would want to make an exception to that, but that would certainly be my recommendation and my preference, that you would have a final draft proposal to consider at a full council meeting. And therefore, we are really looking at this week,
Yeah,
2 full days
Right.
of work. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't, and our team would not do that, but you're talking about crystal balls and things. I do not want to give anyone a false sense of what the probability is that we'll get that. Also, through Mr. President, I want to make clear that we are looking for some direction this evening as far as if there would be a committee report that comes out from strategic planning tonight, what deal breakers may or may not be for council, as we've just heard. And also, I certainly appreciate the idea about wordsmithing, but I will tell you that some of these issues, I mean, for instance, as far as the city needing written documentation, I mean, that is clearly pursuant to state law and what the requirements are for tax increment financing schemes. So, I mean, yes, you're absolutely correct. There may be a way that we can finesse the language, but some of this point blank just has to be in here. And I am not as optimistic, although I would love to be pleasantly surprised, that the developer's legal team will be accepting of finessing. So again, we'll need to know if that's something that council's willing to, I guess, compromise on.
Well, what I would say is, and I'll talk with Mr. Tolet, he will have the floor after I do, that, so that would be July the 3rd by noon. We would have a working document in place, received to our attorneys for their review. I think that's fair. I mean, we're talking about timelines and deadlines to get something done and to bring before this committee and council ultimately to have something done. We can have them make sure that these are the minor talking points, would appear. They're not so minor, but that is a deadline. If it's not received by that certain timeline, then we're not going to bring it before this council.
With all due respect, Mr. President, Thursday, the 3rd at noon, to have a response back is not enough time to, again, deal with any necessary feedback and to draft draft the legislation to then serve upon this
So
council.
are you saying that the 7th is not a doable timeline then?
I think that we would need it by Wednesday, the 2nd. I think tomorrow and
Then
Wednesday, by close of business on the 2nd.
That's fine. Wednesday the 2nd, then it is at noon. Mr. Tolet, then Ms. Sawerka.
Through you, Mr. President, just for the record, I totally agree with Mrs. Mitchell about us not giving up our rights. And just thinking about it, Mr. Yost was here at our last meeting getting approval from us on his second phase of his development, and for us to make special exception for something even bigger isn't right. So I agree with that.
Ms. Sawerka?
Just through the chair, I don't understand why we couldn't have a special meeting next week and give them a day and a half you got a holiday week. People aren't even in the office. If we have a meeting on Monday, we could have a council meeting or strategic planning meeting on Wednesday of next week, and that would give them enough time to go back and forth. I mean, to rush this in a day and a half, I don't understand when we could have a meeting, a strategic planning meeting next Wednesday, the 10th or whatever that date is, on 7th, 8th, 9th. I mean, I really truly think there are, of the 5 kind of, I'm going to call them roadblocks, they're not, some are and some aren't. There's 2 or so that just need to be rewritten with some blanks and some dates and some language. We have to narrow in on the ones that are sort of immovable and make a decision on those. And to get those done in a day and a half and send them to the attorney and get them back, I mean, I would do what the majority feels, but what's 2 more days if we had a special meeting a week? Today's, what's today, Tuesday, right? Monday, today's Monday. See, when you're retired, you lose all track. Wednesday, and you just give it would be an extra day.
Through you, Mr. President, if I may, these could be reset to, I mean, ultimately, it's your schedule. Could send this to CD Finance on the 14th. There's, the schedule for the 7th was at the behest of the developer. Ideally, and Attorney Ballas will say, ideally, we could set the time so to allow the school development agreement is being worked on, they're making progress, but, I mean, in an ideal world, and I don't want to speak for Attorney Ballas, and then I'm going to do just that, the school development agreement would be approved and formally, and then we would go. So there's nothing that says that we couldn't take action shortly after that. I mean, this is a time frame that You could have a special meeting, we could wait till our next meeting. There's all the realm of possibility. Now, obviously, the special meeting, I know we're in summer session, and the issue is,
Availability.
availability. And again, that's not my call. And that's just,
Mr. Oswald?
if you're
Through you,
able.
Mr. President. Okay, I thank the attorneys for all the work they're doing on this agreement. We've been focusing on nothing but the agreement. And I think, to me, they're losing track if this development is what the city really wants or needs. When always I've asked the question, if this was financially good for the city, how much money are we going to put in the coffers? Nobody says, Kenny, we're looking to get $5 million a year off this project, and this is going to torpedo the city so we don't have to keep coming back and asking for more money, okay? They are not mentioning all the city services that we're going to be using, the fire, the police, the garbage, even the schools that are hurting for money right now that are going to be, 400 people, could be 800 kids. Are they going to be able to handle all that? So I keep asking the question, is this something that we really want? And we keep on doing these agreements and keep on moving forward. I don't feel it's good for the city. I'm thinking for the city. That's what I want. I don't have anything in this except for my city to do good. And I don't feel this is a good deal for the city because of that. Now, you can work out your TIFs, whether it's with the city, whether it's with the port, and get all this stuff squared away. And I'm not going to agree that this is a good deal for the city. Thank you.
So, what's today? Today's the 30th. When did we respond to them and our red line to them in regards to your comments? No, when did we have it? When did we send this to them?
That was on, let me pull my calendar,
Right,
I think the 19th.
for the 19th. So we had a response letter on June the 26th. And was there dialogue between their phone calls, emails, in regards to this, other than this letter you're getting to receiving to you on June 26th?
We spoke on the 19th. We had a Teams call. Myself, two attorneys for DBR, and the school district's attorney was on that call as well, talking about the school compensation agreement. While we were on that call, we had sent our comments over to them, and then 1 week later, we did not receive any calls in the meantime. 1 week later, I received this letter on the 26th.
So they've been aware of, obviously, our red lines, and then they drafted this letter on the 26th. And there was a meeting at the schools most recently in regards to this, or no? With the schools, do you know? I'm just asking.
I'm not aware of one.
And then I guess another question to follow up, is there a priority level of, does the city have to approve of this first before the schools? Is there a level? I mean, each mechanism is a little bit different, but are the schools going to say, well, we're not doing this until the city's on board, or to a vote?
There's no legal requirement that which one goes first. I would say, generally speaking, the city, the school district would usually approve a TIF before the city. On the call where the school district's attorney was on the call, he did voice his preference that the city approve first. But that's a preference, it's not a legal requirement.
Okay. School board meets on, what day, the 16th?
Through you, Mr. President. Yes, they indicated that the earliest that they would take action would be at the next meeting, July 16th. And they are, Mr. Balthus received a draft copy of the school compensation agreement the same day as we sent our response back on July 19th. Or no, I'm sorry, on July 26th, the same date we got the letter. So there's progress being made on their draft agreement.
know. Just, for me personally, we've been back and forth on this, and basically on the mayor's comments in regards to talking, having an open dialogue. They kind of know our position on this. But I'll defer to the committee as a whole. I mean, this is not just my decision. I mean, I've just made that recommendation to get it over and through. If this body is trying to move forward instead of keep continually dragging it out more, then we'll go to another meeting. I mean, I think we've been going back and forth. Are we close? Sure. But if this is presented to DVR's attorney and their teams that we're not giving out any of this, then we're just, Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. Chair, through you, I would make the recommendation that we meet either the 9th or the 10th, because like Mrs. Zaworka said, it's the week of the holiday, the 4th is coming, people aren't in the office. Let's give them an opportunity. Yes, we've been working on this forever. So, and yes, we're all ready to be done with it. But let's give them the opportunity. Let's meet we can meet on the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, and get it done.
Ms. Zaworka and then Mr. Tolet.
Thank you, through you. I think we give them a day or two. Again, we're down to 5 things that need to be resolved. But I'm sitting here thinking, but we're also going to get enough, and I realize there are 2 trains going down 2 tracks. The lawsuit is totally different. But before we take action on this, we should at least be updated on where the lawsuit is so that we understand. I mean, I think that there's 2 or 3 things here that can be easily redrafted and taken care of. The other 2 major, we are putting them in the major category. We need to really have some conversation about, and perhaps we need to have the understanding of the lawsuit as well before we make that decision. But I think it's unfair to say, be done by noon the 2nd when it's a holiday week, and what's 2 more days? It's the 7th, the 9th, it really doesn't matter. I don't think we need to wait until the schools act. Yeah.
Mr. Tolet and then Mr. Schneider.
I agree with Mrs. Sork. We should take this, we're trying to back both sets of attorneys into a corner here, and if it's not until the 14th where we do it, that would work.
Mr. Schneider.
Through you, Mr. President, I was sort of feeling the same way as Mr. Tolet. I don't want to have a meeting if we don't have any content or update, a counter or conversation from the other party. I don't think it's necessary. So once we have something to report back, I think we proceed with a meeting tentatively for X date. And if we don't have any content, we cancel the meeting potentially. Law Director Deary, sorry.
Through you, Mr. President, I don't necessarily disagree. One, I think that about this, if you have anything you want to chime in on, I think that it's important that we as the city's council have a direction as far as what are and aren't your deal breakers. And also so that we can communicate that going forward. And also, I think then we're able to then communicate that to the developers' attorneys that the ball is in their court, and that when we get a response from them, that then council can take action. But you're right, I think setting artificial meeting dates with agenda items, and then maybe we have something to provide to you and to discuss, and maybe we don't, has proven fruitful and ultimately frustrating for you all, and understandably so.
Mr. Schneider.
Through you, Mr. President. I also concur with many of my colleagues in regards to my, no further I am completely in agreement with the multi-step phase approval process, because it has been done continuously for every developer that's had a multi-phase development in the community, and it needs to proceed with this project as well, and I think we're all on the same page.
Okay, there's nothing further in regards to what's being, as far as the TIF, and addressing the ADA agreement. At this time, is there any more discussion in regards to that? At this time, we're going to go into executive session to talk about pending litigation. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Roll call vote for executive session. Callahan?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Armstrong?
Aye.
Oswald?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Tolet?
Aye.
Lippian? Sawerka?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Snyder?
Aye.
Stewart? Roll call session, or roll call vote.
Ask
is
everybody
roll
out
call.
in the audience to need to step out due to pending litigation. Mr. Schneider can stay, Ms. McKillips. Go ahead. Conley, are you asking Brian to turn off the recordings? Okay, so we're back into session over and through here. At this time, I'll make a announcement that we're going to go for a strategic planning meeting on a tentative strategic planning meeting for July 22nd at 6 p.m. based on our conversations from that point. So I have nothing more to add to this conversation. At this time, I'll get a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.